Montreal just last night, and what began as a protest quickly devolved into violent riots fueled by anti-Semitic hate speech. We've seen this before. Jewish communities across the city were targeted, and the chaos has sparked outrage throughout Canada. This episode of the Aaron Cohen Show, sponsored by the Cherry's Deep Concealment Holster. Same holster I trained Keanu on for the John Wick franchise. This thing runs below the waistband. It's never going to fall off you. Zero digging into your gut, and a lightning fast draw with just a little bit of training. Go to cherriescounterterror.com and finally carry with comfort and proper concealment. Let's get into it. Now, although I was raised in Los Angeles and eventually moved to Israel and served in the IDF, I was originally born in Montreal, and I still have a ton of family there. Watching this happen in the city where my roots are, it's a little personal. And Montreal has always been a place where Jewish families like mine, both my father's side, my mother's side, found safety, community, and seeing it engulfed in this type of anti-Semitic violence and garbage is pretty devastating. And while Montreal burns, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, little woke Justy, was seen dancing at a Taylor Swift concert. Prime Minister Trudeau, let me make something very clear to you. While Montreal, a city where I was born in, where much of my family still lives, was engulfed in riots fueled by anti-Semitic hate, you were dancing at a concert. And you weren't leading, and you weren't addressing the violence, and you still haven't said a thing. And you weren't protecting the Jewish community in your country. You were absent, physically and morally. And your words matter. And your actions matter even more. When you publicly threatened to arrest Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, you didn't just criticize a leader. You emboldened those who hate Jews. You gave a green light to extremists who you've been importing for years, who see your rhetoric as permission to act out and their little anti-Semitic fantasies. And now we're seeing the results. Shattered windows, desecrated property, and Jewish families in fear across the city for their safety all over Montreal. This isn't just negligence. This is complicity. And your failure to stand against hate has made Canada's Jewish community a prime target. And instead of addressing it head on, you've chosen to ignore it, downplaying it, to go about your night as if Jewish lives in your country don't matter. Leadership is about protecting your people. All of your people. And you failed the Jewish community. And you've been failing them for quite some time. You failed Montreal and you failed Canada. And it's time for you to take responsibility for the climate of hate that you've allowed to grow. Jewish Canadians and patriotic Canadian citizens across the country are calling for your resignation as we speak. And after last night, it's hard to argue that they're wrong. And in my opinion, it's just a matter of time until you get voted out. And then there's this.
Final solution is coming your way. The final solution. You know what the final solution is? Do you know what the final solution is?
This violent racist individual is extremely dangerous. Serving beverages to Jewish patients while calling on a final solution, the Nazi systemic extermination of the Jewish people. Now, I don't normally talk to anti-Semitism, but when there's violence escalating here and law enforcement is part of this, that's when it's time for me to jump in. And this one here is beyond unacceptable. We're talking about someone openly espousing Nazi rhetoric, making direct references to the extermination of Jews, and operating a business inside of a hospital that serves Montreal's Jewish community. The phrase final solution isn't just offensive. This is a chilling callback to the darkest chapter of history. And using it in this context is clear incitement to hatred and violence. And that's all this is. Incitement, masked as free speech. And the fact that this individual was allowed to operate in close proximity to Jewish patients was not only a complete failure, it's an absolute oversight. But here's the good news. Action has been taken, and following that public outrage, Second Cup terminated Al-Dahadi's franchise agreement. Bye-bye. Removing her from the network, the Jewish General Hospital has also ended its business relationship with her, ensuring that she's no longer allowed to operate within their facility. And so both the hospital and the Second Cup issued statements reaffirming their zero-tolerance policies against hate speech and discrimination. And this is exactly the kind of swift and decisive response we need when hate crosses into this type of dangerous territory. And again, I'm coming at this from the risk management perspective here. This threat assessment is real, but this situation highlights the broader issue. Why did it take public outrage for these actions to happen? Hate speech like this is never harmless. I've been saying this for over a year. It's a precursor to violence. And institutions, whether they're hospitals, businesses, governments, need to proactively ensure that individuals taking part in this type of hate are not allowed to operate in spaces meant to serve and protect the community. This is just another example of how hate speech is not just words. It's dangerous. And whether it's on the streets, whether it's online, or inside institutions like hospitals, this fosters fear. This creates division and violence. Let me say it again. This escalates to violence. And this is exactly why this needs to be addressed now across every Western country. What we're seeing in Montreal isn't unique. This is part of a global rise in anti-Semitic violence. Amsterdam, UCLA, and now Canada. Hate speech, when left unchecked, hiding behind free speech, becomes a pipeline to violence, and it's time to hold those responsible accountable. Hate speech isn't harmless. It begins by creating an us versus them mentality. Let me explain this. Spreading divisive rhetoric that dehumanizes a group of people. What happens is over time that rhetoric becomes normalized, repeated in protests and on campuses and in online forums until it desensitizes communities. Vulnerable individuals are then radicalized, drawn into those echo chambers where extremist ideas then become amplified, and eventually this culminates into violence. That's how this works. So how do we stop this? First, we need to enforce the laws. And in Canada, Section 319 of the Criminal Code prohibits incitement to hatred. Google it. Yet no one in Montreal has been held accountable for chants like death to the Jews. In the Netherlands, law criminalizing incitement to hatred need to be applied to those responsible for the attacks on the Israeli fans. And here in the United States, while the First Amendment protects free speech, it does not protect speech that incites imminent violence. And laws against hate crimes and terror recruitment need to be enforced immediately and consistently. That is where we are at. And leadership starts at the top. Prime Minister Trudeau and leaders everywhere must step up now and show that hate has no place in our society. And this isn't about politics. It's about public safety and protecting the values that we hold dear here in the West. It isn't just a problem for governments to solve. Social media platforms need to be held accountable for enabling the spread of hate. Communities need to stand together to protect the vulnerable. And law enforcement must treat anti-Semitism and hate crimes with the same urgency and resources as any other form of violent extremism. I have seen what happens when hate speech is left unchecked. I've seen how it festers. I've seen how it radicalizes and ultimately leads to extreme violence. And so if you've watched this episode and you felt angry or hurt or inspired to do something, hold your leaders accountable. Speak out. Speak out against the hate in your communities. Support organizations working to combat anti-Semitism. Together, we're going to shut down this pipeline of hate before it becomes the fire that burns through our society. Real quick, if you guys are a fan of the show and you're a fan of my work and you watch me on Fox and you're digging my new show, do me a favor, just hit the link in the description of this video and grab yourself a mini sponsorship package. They start at $25. We're independently produced. Helps keep the lights on. Appreciate you guys. Again, this episode brought to you by the Cherry's Deep Concealment Holster. Same holster I trained Keanu on for the John Wick franchise. This thing's never going to fall off you. Lightning fast draw. Zero digging into your gut. Also, grab yourself a copy of my best-selling memoir, My Journey as the First American in Israel's top counterterrorism unit. I've got autographed copies online. Go to the description in this video and grab yourself a signed copy. I've got limited editions left. And again, I just want to thank you guys for watching. If you're a fan, like, subscribe, share this episode. Comment down below. Let me know what you think. It's important to keep the conversation going. I'm Aaron Cohen. I want to thank you guys for watching this breaking episode, and I will catch you guys on the next one.